can be easy to forget when you're a lifelong Pokemon fan and although specific terms are just part of your vocabulary, but we actually use a ton of terms that are in no way, shape or form official, yet we all understand them as if they are. Some are quite obviously not official, like Dexit or Nuzlocke, but I wouldn't be surprised if not all of you realize that terms like Legendary Trio or Box Legendary are fan-made terms and not official in the slightest. Game Freak or the Pokemon Company have never referred to any Pokemon as a Legendary Trio. That's something we created. But it has sometimes caused some weird discrepancies. You see, there are several phenomena in Pokemon that have an official name but are much better known by their unofficial fan term, to the point many of you might not even know that these terms exist since, well, the only people that use them are Game Freak and the Pokemon Company themselves. Probably the most famous example of this belongs to one of Pokemon's most famous groups, your Bulbasaur, Charmander and Squirtle, the ones you start the game with, i.e. your starter Pokemon, as is by far the most popular term. It's also one of the oldest, as it has been around since the dawn of the series, although an exact starting point is impossible to pin down. It's at the very least not used in either the Gen 1 games or anime and appears to be either a fan-created term or coined by side materials such as strategy guides. However, over time, the phrase became so widely used that it slowly started becoming the semi-official term. It made its official debut in the anime episode A Six-Pack Attack from the Ruby and Sapphire arc, before then continuing to be used in the generations that followed. Its first in-game appearance would take a while though, but in Pokemon Black and White, starter Pokemon is used to describe, well, starter Pokemon, in the Passerby Analytics HQ in Castelia City. Junichi Masuda has even used the term in an interview with Nintendo Power in 2009. It doesn't get a whole lot more official than that. However, in Gen 6 things would change. From now on, starter Pokemon is a term that the Pokemon Company prefers to avoid, in favor of the new official term, first partner Pokemon. The reason for this, as explained by former Nintendo marketing employee Krista Yang, is that starter implies you're gonna get rid of it at some point. It's just to start you off, whereas first partner implies it's gonna stick around, it's just the first of many. Ever since its introduction, this term has seen widespread usage in official games, in the TCG, in merchandise lines and in the anime. For all intents and purposes, it is the official term for what we fans still most often call starter Pokemon. The old term is definitely more ingrained to say the least. In fact, it's so ingrained that the Pokemon Company occasionally still forgets it themselves. The website for ORAS called Trico, Mudkip and Torchic starter Pokemon, Sun and Moon did the same with its first partner Pokemon, and the word was even still used in trailers for Sword and Shield's DLC and Legends Arceus, so that's fairly recent. There is even a hidden comment on the Scarlet and Violet website that implies the term starter Pokemon was still used behind the scenes to describe what outward messaging only calls first partner Pokemon. All these examples are without a doubt oversights though. The vast majority of material calls these Pokemon first partners, and the most important source, the games themselves, have without failure referred to them by that term since X and Y. How long it will take for the fanbase to adapt though? I feel like that could be a while. First partner Pokemon doesn't exactly roll off the tongue as well as starters does. But if you keep up with Pokemon news and official material, I suspect this is a term you've come into contact with. It's easily the most famous one I'm gonna be talking about in this video, and it's also the only one where the fan term was at one point official. And it also means that while I'm sure literally all of you know what I mean when I say pseudo-legendary Pokemon, this term was never official. It has never been used by any official Pokemon source, to the point that even Japan felt compelled to create its own fan term for it, the 600 Club, referring to how all these Pokemon have a base stat total of 600. It also means, funnily enough, that they include Archaladon, while we usually do not, as it doesn't have the same features as other pseudo-legendaries, like being a free-stage evolutionary line. Anyway, while it is definitely not as widespread as first partner Pokemon, it does appear as if the Pokemon Company has decided on an official term for these mons, the quite appropriate powerhouse Pokemon. This was first used in a merchandise line for the Pokemon Center, which of course focused on the Pokemon we would call pseudo-legendaries. That isn't enough to nail this down yet. After all, prior to this, the term late bloomers had been used to refer to Dragonite, Tyranitar and the rest when they received a merchandise line, but that name has never resurfaced, so some patience was required. But then, When raid events were announced for Scarlet and Violet, for Dragonite, Larvitar, Beldum, Bagon and Goomy, once again the term powerhouse Pokemon was used in the official announcement. And as such, I think we can conclude this is the official term the Pokemon Company is going with for at least the time being, and while I'm not so confident first partner Pokemon will stick, I can see this one doing better. Powerhouse is definitely a friendlier term than pseudo-legendary, so it has that going for it. But until an official game starts using it, we probably won't see it take over as the preferred term. But who knows, this change is still very new. There hasn't even been a single game released since it was introduced. So for all we know, we could all be using this term sooner rather than later. Although there is a decent selection of concepts people still use the fan terms for in droves, even though there have been official names for them for sometimes close to a decade. A very simple example is the Weather Trio, Groudon, Kyogre and Rayquaza. This term has existed in the community ever since the original Gen 3 games, and as such was already so familiar for everyone that when ORAS introduced the official term of super ancient Pokemon, no one bothered to actually use it. It's funny how sometimes those things can change, like with the legendary dogs, which was a pretty common fan term once upon a time, but has since been completely replaced by legendary beasts, since we've seemingly all realized now that neither of them are dogs, they're cats. Yet with the Weather Trio, we don't follow the official reading, just like with Sinnoh's legendaries by the way. The term Creation Trio still gets used way more than the official term for Jolga, Palkia and Giratina, which is the Pokemon of Myth. Honestly, pretty cool name. I might just prefer it over the Creation Trio, even if it is a little vague and sounds like it overlaps with mythical Pokemon. Less egregious is the name for that other Sinnoh group, Mesprit, Azelf and Uxie, who are often called the Lake Trio by fans, but their official name is the Lake Guardians. And all of this doesn't just apply to names we use for groups of Pokemon either, it also affects, say, the competitive scene. Everyone with a slight interest in Pokemon battling knows what entry hazards are. You know, moves like Spikes or Stealth Rock, but entry hazard is a completely fan-made term. The official word is Trap, which is actually a lot shorter and easier, yet also fails to properly describe it, so I can't see why it hasn't really seen much usage. Something similar can also be seen on the other end of the Pokemon spectrum, in the collector communities. While there may not be an official term for a living dex, for example, there is a precedent for an official term for the practice of catching a Pokemon in a Pokeball that matches its aesthetic. So, you know, Reshiram in a Premier Ball, for example. In fan communities, this is known as Baltism, a combination of ball and autism. I can't say I hear this term much nowadays, but it used to be more common, although it is easy to see why the Pokemon Company would never ever adapt this name for real. Instead, they have used the term Ball Freak to refer to this practice, which also sounds kinda suggestive, so I'm not sure how happy they are with it. But hey, it has been used for the merchandise line focusing on Pokemon that came with matching Pokeballs, so it was at the very least approved once upon a time, although it hasn't resurfaced yet. But if this video has made you think that the Pokemon Company and Game Freak really go out of their way to make sure fan terms never become official, you're mistaken. Several fan terms have since become adapted as the actual canonical term, so just for fun, let's look at how that happened. The first is the one that always surprised me a little. Evolution, of course used to refer to the Eevee family. It very much feels like a fan term, and that's because it is, but unlike starter Pokemon or pseudo-legendary, this one was embraced by the Pokemon Company and has since become an official term being used in marketing, TCG sets and the anime. The first time the term was ever officially used was in the official Pokemon Stadium 2 guidebook. I must say though, the term Evolution has never appeared in an actual mainline Pokemon game, so if you consider that a must to be an official term, then I guess this technically isn't one, even though it has often been used, even with capital letter, implying it's an official term. But there is one more phrase that is entirely fan-made, yet it feels unbelievable to think about it like that now. When introduced in Gen 2, shiny Pokemon were exclusively referred to as rare Pokemon, without a capital letter. Pokemon Stadium 2 calls them color Pokemon with a capital C, implying this is an official term. But then there is the TCG, which refer to them as shining Pokemon, which is actually the Japanese name and not a fan-made term, unlike our shiny Pokemon. In Gen 3, the term alt color was used in debug menus, once again with seemingly official capital letters, while an event shiny Zigzagoon was referred to as rare colored, this time without capital letters, so this was more of a description. Throughout this entire time, fans had been calling these elusive Pokémon shiny Pokémon, as I doubt I have to tell you, with the name based on the sparkling effect that accompanied them. But it wasn't until Platinum that this term was officially adapted, when an event shiny Melodic was referred to as such. And ever since, it has become the completely official term. Both Unova games outright use it in dialogue, and the introduction of the shiny charm leaves literally no discussion from here on out. The anime was already on board earlier though. Even though Ash catches his shiny Noctowl during the Johto season of the anime, it isn't referred to as such until the episode Working on a Right Move, from the Diamond and Pearl season. It literally took 2 generations for the anime to acknowledge Noctowl as a shiny Pokémon, which sounds like a ridiculously long time, but hey, it's earlier than the games did, so that's gotta count for something. Either way, this is one of the rare moments in not just Pokémon, but Nintendo history that a fan-made term has become canon, and not exactly in a minor way either, as shiny Pokémon is obviously a super famous term now. Personally, I think a big reason why this fan term happened to prevail is because shinies always had an official term in Japanese, so that's not the same situation as say pseudo-legendaries, and it's also obviously a fan term that already came quite close to simply being a localized version of the official Japanese word. But that still doesn't change the fact that the fans created it and Game Freak merely adapted it, rather than the other way around. Anyway, have you ever heard of some of the terms in this video? And what do you think? Are first partner Pokémon and powerhouse Pokémon going into your vocabulary? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokémon content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.